namaste and mabuhay to everyone. Good morning. Thank you to Professor Indo Manheth and all the colleagues at Stratbase for this invitation. Really honored to join all my colleagues here, and let me convey my greetings to all representatives of the Philippines government, armed forces, Coast Guard, colleagues from the media, and diplomatic colleagues. Like others, let me also begin by saying that today's event is a fitting tribute to the legacy of one of the flag bearers of Philippines diplomacy, Mr. Albert Del Rosario. And I think we celebrate in this discussion one of his signature achievements in the arbitral award. I've been asked to speak a bit about India's Act East policy and how that fits in with the larger construct of the Indo-Pacific. As some of you may be aware, the Act East policy initially began in the early 90s as an economic initiative as India opened up its economy. And it focused primarily on trade and investment, and of course, to rediscover some of our civilization and cultural connections with the Southeast Asian region, with ASEAN at the core. Over the years, this agenda has broadened and the scope has also expanded in geographical terms to cover Japan, Korea, and China, and increasingly also the Pacific Island countries. The agenda of the Act East policy has also expanded to include connectivity, people-to-people ties, and development cooperation. And more recently, there's also an increasing stress on defense and security engagement, specifically focused on HADR, counterterrorism, maritime security. We in India recognize that the significant portion of our interests lie to our east. And even as we were building the process and structures of engagement, the landscape of the region has evolved considerably. There are larger ongoing trends towards global and regional economic and political rebalancing. And therefore, India's policies have had to adapt. As the Japanese colleague said, the late Prime Minister Abe of Japan, speaking in India's parliament, spoke about, in 2007, the confluence of the two seas. And this has unfolded quite rapidly as connectivity, supply chains have all become linked, and regional developments are having a greater impact even beyond the region. This makes, therefore, the Indo-Pacific a very practical and relevant frame of reference. And in any case, looking at the Indian Ocean and the Pacific as distinct compartments is not tenable anymore. In a broader way, the separation of the Pacific and the Indian Ocean was perhaps an outcome of the US strategic dominance that existed since 1945, but the past 3 decades have seen visible changes in the US repositioning, the growth of China, and its policies towards the region, as well as the rising role of Japan and Australia and South Korea and other actors, including our European partners well represented today. More importantly, I think the broadening outlook of ASEAN itself has driven this transformation. Thus, I would say that India's Act East policy today has expanded to an Indo-Pacific policy. We see the growth and opportunities in this broader region, and one that we see extending from the shores of Eastern Africa to the western shores of America. And some of our colleagues have already spoken, so I would not detail the importance of this region for the world, but just to say that both in terms of population, GDP, growth, and in terms of security, really this region is the fulcrum of global developments. Accordingly, our responses and analytical policy frameworks have adjusted. Today, we have a broader and more comprehensive engagement, one that recognizes the interplay of economic partnerships and security requirements, and one that seeks multiple pathways for engagement. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in speaking in Mauritius in 2015, coined the acronym SAGAR, which stood for Security and Growth for All in the Region, and it envisaged a free, open, inclusive, peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific, one that is built on a rules-based international order, sustainable and transparent infrastructure, investment, freedom of navigation over flight, unimpeded lawful commerce, mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, peaceful resolution of disputes, as well as equality of all nations, big and small. To give concrete shape to this vision, we have taken multiple initiatives. We announced the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative at the 14th East Asia Summit in Bangkok in November 2019. At the plurilateral level, we have actively engaged with large fellow democracies through the Quad mechanism with the US, Japan, and Australia. And we also have engaged actively with ASEAN in multiple dialogue pathways. And underpinning our engagement with ASEAN is a set of strong bilateral partnerships, such as with the Philippines. And allow me to take a couple of minutes just to say that I do believe that the India-Philippines relationship has entered its best phase ever. We just had 2 weeks ago a joint commission meeting in Delhi with Secretary Manalo, and the joint statement that we issued at the conclusion of that meeting reflects the enormous dynamism and diversification of our partnership. In terms of today's discussion specifically, we've had a growing defense and security engagement. We are on the verge of an inaugural maritime affairs dialogue that will cover both maritime security but also broader areas in the maritime domain, recognizing the importance of the maritime domain for both India and the Philippines. We also are looking forward to greater engagement in terms of maritime security, joint exercises, engagements between our coast guards, and so on. Let me take a few minutes also to say that today's discussion on the Arbitral Award is a reflection of the broader approach that both India and ASEAN have taken, and our bilateral relations with the Philippines as well. And accordingly, I think in the joint statement, we did recognize the need for adherence to international law and called for the Arbitral Award to be respected in that context. Some of you in the Philippines may not be aware that India had also entered into an arbitration process through the PCA around the same time with Bangladesh for the delimitation of our maritime boundary. And the judgment in that award was not entirely in India's favor. In fact, I would also want to say that Bangladesh had the better of the award. But we have recognized and implemented that award. And I think that brings me to my final set of observations, which is to reiterate that all countries have an obligation to respect international law, but perhaps bigger countries have a larger obligation to respect international law. And that in adhering to agreements that have already been signed and in implementing them is the real test of state behavior. Unfortunately, that has not always been the case in our region, but we do hope that with discussions such as this one, where we reiterate the will of the international community to have a concerted and coordinated approach to ensure that all actors, big and small, adhere to the rule of law and rules-based international order. Thank you very much.